Hi, welcome back to 23 Days of Astrology. This is day one and entitled Home as a Refuge. So today we are going to talk about the chart of Pearl S. Buck, who was a writer. She was also a Nobel and Pulitzer Prize winning author who penned over 100 novels and 20 children's books. She spent her youth abroad with parent missionaries and became an activist for adoption. So that's just a little bit about Pearl. If you're not familiar with her, I fell in love with her chart. This is one of my favorite charts to ponder and think about and write about and explore. And it was first introduced to me through my mentor and tutor, Michelle, over at Nightlight Astrology through her amazing New Moons letter. She had, Pearl's chart in there and explored it. And Michelle lives in Europe and I live in the United States, very close to Pearl's home in Pennsylvania. And it was funny because it has been on my list. It had been on my list of places to visit and explore. And then when I received that newsletter from Michelle and the chart in there, I was like, now's the time to do it. So, and that was a while ago. But since then, I found a lot of joy in studying Pearl's chart before I visited, and then I've gone to her home and toured it several times. And once you study a chart and then can go to the home of, say, it's a historical person that you live near, this is a really fun exercise to do. The chart really comes to life. You can make, educated guesses about what the decor could look like or what kind of things you might find there, what their furniture style might be. And of course, then learning facts about their life from being on a tour there I find that to be a lot of fun. So today I thought it would be fitting to share Pearl's chart with you. I also do local workshops called astrology workshops for creatives. And being that Pearl was a creative, she was a writer, she's one of my favorite charts to use as an example in that workshop. So let's take a peek over here. Because I'm keeping these videos short and sweet, I will just be pulling out a few of my favorite nuggets to share with you, although it is hard to choose. So here is Pearl's birth chart. Right off of the bat, one of my favorite things to think about in this birth chart is her writing. I'm also a writer, and I am fascinated by Pearl's ability to produce books. So where do we find this in the chart? If we look at her chart here and we see Saturn in the sixth house, Saturn, the planet speaking to boundaries and limitations and things that take a really long time, her dedication to her craft. So Saturn sits here in the dutiful sign of Virgo in the sixth house, a place that calls for endurance and perseverance. And all of this is tied to Capricorn because Capricorn is Saturn's home. So it's all tied to that 10th house, that visible piece of us in the world, our career, our status, our reputation. So this signature is just fairly obvious and really cool and interesting to me as a writer, and someone who admires her work and admires her dedication, that how that Saturn has kind of pulled through for her and her like endurance and her ability to call on this daily dedication to her craft has really shown through the many books that she's published and won prizes for. So I think that's just like a fun little tidbit to start off with as you're looking at her chart. Um, Now we'll pivot over to another facet that is fun to talk about. So we see an Aries rising with Pearl's chart, and we see Jupiter sitting here in the first house. Jupiter is, of course, tied to her ninth house of travel, of learning, of expanding the mind and spirituality, because Sagittarius is Jupiter's home. So this is really showing us how Pearl, which would be represented by the first house, her identity and her character, has lived most of her youth abroad. When she was just an infant, her parent missionaries took her to China, where she lived up until she went to high school. She did come home for, I believe, 1 or 2 trips back to the United States during that time, and they were by boat. And they were some long journeys for her and her family. Um, one of my favorite stories is when she reading her one of her biographies. The first time she tasted ice cream was on one of those journeys when she came through, I believe, San Francisco. I'm not sure. Um, but I think when she came through California on one of her journeys home when she was around 8 was the first time she tasted ice cream. And it was fun reading that with my 8-year-old, just kind of wrapping your head around how that would be the first time that you would taste ice cream. But anyway, this really shows the story of her life, her youth abroad, and I'll leave it at that. But there's one more piece of this that I like before I wrap it up with this fourth house Cancer. When you tour Pearl, if you tour Pearl's house, she has 2 libraries, and I love libraries. They're one of my absolute favorite places to be. And she was known to have no clocks in her libraries. And she has an extensive collection of books. When you tour her historic home, she has all built-in bookshelves in her bedroom, and also, of course, framing all the walls in her library. And I just think that was really a really cool expression of Jupiter expanding the mind, showing that she was someone who was really saturated in knowledge and was able to take so much in through learning via books. And there was no clocks in the libraries. I think I just said this, so I don't know. I'm going to say it again. There was no clocks in the libraries because you just can't put a time on reading. And I just love that. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to say here was look at this fourth house. Look at all this energy concentrated down here in the bottom of her chart. So this is the fourth house, the place that deals with home and family, our roots, our foundation, what we rest upon, what we're built upon. And all of this is in the very nurturing sign of Cancer. So we see her sun sign here in Cancer. We also see her moon was here in the sign of Cancer. Not only do her life path and the environment of her life tell us that they're intertwined with home and roots and foundation for her, but we also see Mercury, the planet of communication, in this lineup here. You know, Pearl was someone who had a very regimented schedule from her home. She would write in the morning from 9 to 1, and then she would have lunch with her husband, her second husband, who she had a very long and loving relationship with. And then she was free the rest of the day to tend to the children, her child, and also the children that she fostered and adopted, and later housed to be placed into adoption homes. So this is the story of a very nurturing person who, from the cozy confines of her home, she communicated, she reflected, she was a storyteller. So we see Mercury is tied to the third house of storytelling, and we see that her sun here is tied to the fifth house of mothering and creativity. So all of this is kind of branching out. This creativity is branching out from her place of home, her storytelling and her communication and her writing, branching out from her center of home. This is an important and foundational piece of her story. And lastly, I like to call attention to Mercury, the planet of the mind and of communication. Mercury's home is Gemini, a planet that has to do with duality. And, you know, Pearl lived all of her youth abroad in China. Overseas, she was learning from her mother about America through books that she had, and she was being taught about her home country. But her friends and her environment and her mentors were all in China. So Pearl has said that she felt like a child of 2 worlds. Both China and America felt like her home. And I really feel like This piece of her life is embedded in this Mercury in the sign of home, in this fourth place of home, in the sign of Cancer, a place that speaks to home and speaks to the inner longing for home. I will leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed learning about Pearl's chart as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. It is one of my favorite charts. And if you do live in Pennsylvania, I certainly recommend heading over to her historic home and taking a tour. Until next time, thanks for watching.